Okay, that feeling when you see your Newark flight is delayed again. It's almost like expected, isn't it?
It really is. Newark Liberty, EWR, and delays. They just seem to go together.
But today, we're not just commiserating, we're going to dive deep. We want to understand why. What's the actual story behind all these headaches?
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we pulled together some really interesting stuff. We've got an old MIT study from around 2000 looking at how air traffic control, ATC, was dealing with delays back then.
Okay.
Plus, we've got chatter from pilots and controllers on Reddit, firsthand accounts.
Oh, interesting. Real frontline perspective.
Yeah. And then a bunch of news reports, Forbes, CBS, The Mirror, A-Invest, People.com, CTV, ENR, covering what's happening right now, and even some practical tips from the MPA on just getting to the airport.
So it's a mix of academic, professional news, and practical advice.
Pretty comprehensive.
Yeah. Right. So our mission here is simple. Cut through the noise, the frustration, and give you a clear picture of the challenges at Newark ATC. What's been simmering for years and what's boiling over right now.
And what it all means for you trying to get somewhere.
Exactly. Okay, let's jump in. Because Newark wasn't just recently crowned the delay king, was it? This goes way back.
Oh, way back. I mean, look at 1999. Newark had the highest percentage of delayed flights in the entire U.S., 7.9%.
Wow. Highest in the country.
And the average ATC departure delay, almost 20 minutes, 19.5 minutes back then. By 2000, it was only second to LaGuardia. So, yeah, a long-standing issue.
But the broader picture is interesting, too. Delays across the whole U.S. system jumped 20% between 99 and 2000.
Huge increase system-wide.
But Newark's increase was much smaller, right? Only about 1.6%.
That's right, which suggests maybe they were already trying something. Some initial adaptations were maybe started to take hold, even if the overall problem was huge.
So what was the main driver back then? That MIT study must have looked into it.
Oh, definitely. And the overwhelming culprit, according to them. Weather. Simple as that. Almost 85% of delays at Newark were chalked up to weather.
85%. That's massive.
It is. And it's not just, a bit of rain. Newark's location, the airport layout, it's just really susceptible. It was ranked the 5th most weather-impacted airport out of the 31 busiest in the U.S.
So you've got limited runways, a schedule packed tighter than a sardine can, and it's super sensitive to bad weather. Sounds like a recipe for, delays.
Exactly. A system with very little slack. But the MIT study pointed to other things too, naturally.
Like what?
Well, the physical stuff. Not enough runway capacity, not enough gate space, basic infrastructure limits.
Okay.
Then just how often you get bad weather in the New York area.
Yeah.
Pretty frequent. Plus, the airlines themselves were running these super tight schedules. Almost no buffer time if something went wrong.
Right. Minimal recovery time.
And of course, the big one, the airspace itself. It's just incredibly crowded around New York City. You've got JFK, LaGuardia, Newark, all crammed together.
Okay, so the problems were clear. The MIT team actually went there, right, in June 2000 to see what ATC was doing.
They did.
Yeah.
Spent time observing, talking to people.
What did they find? How was ATC trying to cope?
A key thing they flagged was something called downstream flow constraints. This was a huge reason for planes being held on the ground at Newark.
Downstream.
Yeah.
So problems happening somewhere else.
Exactly. Restrictions or weather happening beyond Newark, maybe over Pennsylvania, or near the destination airport, would bottleneck the system, forcing Newark to hold departures.
Ah, so the delay you experienced sitting at the gate in Newark might actually be because of a storm over Chicago.
Precisely. It highlights how interconnected the whole air traffic system is. It's not just about the local weather bubble.
Makes sense. So what were the controllers doing tactically day to day?
Well, the study looked at a few things. They used standard restrictions, like mile and trail, basically telling planes how much space to keep between them. They required approval requests for certain routes or altitudes. They'd implement fixed closures, shutting down specific navigational points in the sky temporarily.
Like closing off an intersection in the air.
Kind of, yeah. And ground delay programs, GDPs, to meter the flow of planes taking off.
Yeah.
They also looked at using pre-planned reroutes, stuff from the National Playbook.
The National Playbook, like preset detours for common problems.
Exactly. If there's weather here, try this route instead. It was useful, definitely.
But not always.
Right, it had limits. They highlighted a specific day, June 29, 2000. Big thunderstorms rolled through.
Uh-oh.
And the playbook just didn't have ready-made plays for that specific messy weather pattern.
So controllers had to improvise more.
Pretty much. The study also mentioned looking at new tech decision-aiding tools like the Dynamic Spacing Program, DSP, and the Integrated Terminal Weather System, ITWS. We can dig into those.
Okay, yeah, let's talk tech. But first, what about those other potential tactics? Better communication, using that shorter runway, 1129.
Good question. The study mentioned both. Better communication between different ATC facilities like the tower, the TRACON, the center was seen as important.
Naturally.
But they also noted it wasn't always smooth. Maybe unclear who was responsible for what. Coordination wasn't always systematic.
And using runway 1129 more?
That was tricky too. Using it could mess with traffic flows at LaGuardia and nearby Teterboro. Plus, it's shorter, so not all planes could use it. And there were even some pilot union concerns about certain landing procedures there.
Lots of constraints.
Yeah. But beyond these tactical things, the MIT folks pointed to two bigger strategic responses getting underway.
Okay, what were those?
First, the creation of the Air Traffic Control System Command Center, the ATC-SCC. Think of it as the national HQ for managing air traffic flow.
Centralizing control a bit more.
Trying to, yeah. And second, a massive project, redesigning the entire New York airspace. A huge long-term effort.
Okay, let's hold the strategic ones for a sec. You mentioned that specific day, June 29th, 2000. What did that show?
It was a really stark example. Severe thunderstorms hit. They had to close off those navigational fixes, the waypoints in the sky to the west and south of Newark. One northbound, one too.
So major routes shut down.
Right, and the impact was immediate. Total departure delays at Newark just shot up. Then, as the fixes started reopening when the weather cleared downstream.
Delays dropped back down.
Exactly, a very direct correlation. It showed how critical those airspace pathways were.
And you said downstream again, so the weather closing those fixes wasn't necessarily at Newark.
Often, no. They noted restrictions on fixes like Bijiki, Park, Lana. These were triggered by weather way down the line, impacting the destination cities or the route itself. Again, that interconnectedness.
Really illustrates that downstream constraint idea.
Perfectly. And it also showed the limits of the national playbook that day.
Because the pre-planned routes didn't fit the specific storm pattern?
Exactly. The plays didn't match the reality on the ground, or rather in the sky. In trying to create new reroutes on the fly, especially ones that cross the boundaries between different aero traffic control centers, the ARTCCs that manage the high-altitude airspace.
That gets complicated fast.
Very. Requires a ton of coordination, phone calls back and forth, slows everything down when things are already bad.
So the playbook helps, but it's not a magic wand for every weird weather day. Okay, let's talk about those decision-aiding tools. DSP, Departure Spacing Program.
Right, DSP. It was installed in April 2000, just before the MIT team observed it. Its main job was to help controllers space out departing planes more consistently.
Digitally.
Yeah, it reduced how much they had to talk on the radio to coordinate spacing. It also gave them dynamic flight plan info and showed who was lined up on the ground.
Sounds useful. Where did it help most?
The study said it was a big help at the ARTCC, the center, made issuing electronic clearances smoother, especially using preferred routes.
But less useful closer to the airport, at the TRACON.
Apparently, yeah. The TRACON folks found it less helpful because it didn't include enough of the nearby airports in its system. And crucially, DSP was about spacing, not about finding better routes or rerouting planes.
Got it. Managing the queue, not redirecting the traffic. What about the other one? ITWS, Integrated Terminal Weather System.
ITWS. That was up and running by '99 in the New York area. Its big thing was predicting thunderstorms, convective storms, where they'd form, where they'd move.
And controllers liked it.
Very much so, according to the study.
Yeah.
They used it routinely. MIT's Lincoln Lab actually estimated ITWS cut delays by over 49,000 hours a year.
Wow. That translates to real money.
About $150 million annually back then. A huge benefit.
But it wasn't perfect either.
No tool ever is, right?
Yeah.
Controllers wanted more. They wished ITWS could see further out than just the immediate airport area.
Wider coverage.
Yeah. And they wanted predictions not just of storm movement, but also when storms might weaken or die out. Plus predictions for other stuff that limits capacity, like low clouds or strong winds.
So, good tool, but room for improvement. Okay, let's go back to those other potential solutions. Interfacility communication, you said was vital, but tricky.
Absolutely critical, especially when you're rerouting planes all over the place. But the MIT study found issues. The organizational structure could be a bit ambiguous sometimes. Coordination wasn't always, systematic or clearly defined.
So maybe people weren't always sure who to call or what the exact procedure was?
Something like that. The recommendation was basically to streamline things. Maybe give the National Command Center, the ATC, SEC, a bit more authority to direct things, and definitely to standardize the communication procedures more. Makes sense.
Clearer lines of communication. Always good. What about that runway, 1129? Why wasn't that a simple fix?
Several hurdles. Using it could interfere with planes going into LaGuardia or Teterboro, the smaller airport nearby. Big coordination challenge.
Airspace conflicts.
Yeah. Plus, it's shorter, remember? So bigger, heavier planes, especially on long flights, couldn't always use it.
Performance limitation.
And then there were these pilot union concerns about LAASO land and hold short operations. That's a procedure where a plane lands but has to stop before crossing an intersecting runway. Some pilots weren't comfortable with it on 1129.
Okay, so safety and operational concerns there too.
Right. The suggestion was, again, better coordination with LGA and TEBE and factoring 1129 into that big airspace redesign plan.
And just building a whole new runway off the table.
Pretty much. The study said it wasn't feasible.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Interstate 95 on one side, Newark Bay on the other. Just no room physically.
Geographic constraints? What about managing demand? Fewer flights?
You touched on that. Back in 2000, only Terminal B at Newark actually had slot controls limits on hourly flights.
Just one terminal.
Yeah. But the Port Authority, which runs the airport, was apparently thinking about expanding slot controls or maybe trying peak hour pricing, charging more to fly at the busiest times to encourage airlines to shift flights.
Interesting. So a whole menu of options, from tactical tweaks to huge strategic shifts and even managing demand. Let's dig into those strategic ones now. The ATCSCC Command Center first.
Right, the ATCSCC. Its job is basically to be the air traffic manager for the whole country, balancing demand, how many planes want to fly with capacity, how many the system can handle while keeping everything safe.
A national overview.
Exactly. It was a shift towards more centralization, away from every local facility just doing its own thing entirely.
But the local towers and centers still had a lot of say, didn't they?
That's the tension. The ATCSCC provides the big picture strategy, but the local facilities, the TRACONs, the centers, they still operate pretty autonomously day to day.
So potential for disconnect. National plan versus local execution.
That's what the MIT study hinted at. Ambiguities in coordination. They suggested maybe more centralization at ATCSCC could help. But
here's a downside.
yeah, the trade-off is local flexibility. Sometimes the folks on the ground need to react quickly to local conditions, and too much top-down control can hinder that. It's a constant balancing act.
National strategy versus local tactics. Tricky. Okay, and the other big one. The New York airspace redesign. That sounds massive.
Oh, it was, and still is, a monumental effort. It was part of the FAA's bigger plan to modernize the whole national airspace system. Planning started even before 2001.
And the goal?
Really ambitious goals. Increase how many planes the airspace around the airports could handle terminal throughput, reduce congestion higher up in the en route airspace.
Okay.
Try to maintain operations almost like it was clear weather, even when it wasn't near visual conditions, and make the whole system more flexible to handle severe weather better.
Those are huge goals. How were they planning to achieve them?
Several strategies. Using higher altitude arrival routes, keeping planes higher for longer where it's more efficient, faster climbs for departures to get them out of the busy low-level airspace quicker.
Shoot them up and out.
Yeah. Also designing flight paths to fly over less noise-sensitive areas where possible, and relying on more advanced navigation technology, like GPS-based procedures.
And if they pulled all this off, what were the expected payoffs?
The FAA hoped for big things. Fewer delays, obviously, less workload for controllers and pilots, better safety margins, even environmental benefits, like less noise and lower emissions.
Sounds great on paper.
Of course. But the MIT study added a note of caution, realizing those benefits depended heavily on which specific solutions got implemented. And crucially, avoiding getting bogged down in bureaucracy or fights between different stakeholders, airlines, airports, communities, the FAA itself.
Politics and inertia, the usual suspects.
Pretty much. But despite the challenges, that airspace redesign was seen as the most promising path to really making a dent in the long-term delay problem in New York.
Okay, so that was the plan back then. Now let's fast forward to, now, May 2025. Because it feels like things haven't just gotten better, they might have gotten worse. A lot worse.
That's the really sobering part. The recent news, that Reddit thread, it paints a picture of a system under extreme stress right now.
That Reddit thread title alone. Air traffic controllers, WTF is going on in Newark.
Tells you everything about the frustration level, doesn't it? It really does. These are the people on the front lines saying something is seriously wrong.
And a huge change happened recently, right? Moving the Newark sector control from the New York Tracon N90 out on Long Island.
Yeah, the old Liberty area.
Moved it to the Philadelphia Tower. Now it's called Area C.
That's right. A massive operational shift. Controllers who worked the Newark airspace from Westbury, Long Island, were basically told they had to relocate to Philly.
How'd that go down?
Not well, according to reports and that Reddit discussion, it's been incredibly disruptive. There have been mentions of system outages during the transition.
Outages while managing Newark traffic. That's terrifying.
Deeply concerning, yeah. And reports of controllers taking stress leave or trauma leave, as some sources put it, because of the chaos.
And N90, the New York Tracon, was already short-staffed before this move, wasn't it?
Absolutely. That's been a known issue for years. Then you force this move, and some experienced controllers just said forget it and retired early instead of relocating.
So the existing staffing problem got worse.
Exactly. Compounded by the nationwide struggle to recruit and train new controllers fast enough. Plus, you've got aging equipment issues and the sheer technical difficulty of piping all the radar and radio feeds from New York down to Philly reliably.
It sounds like a perfect storm of problems converging.
It really does.
Yeah.
Some reports literally describe Newark ATC as being on fire because of all these FAA and ATC issues combined.
And the airlines are feeling it. United cut, what, 35 daily round trips?
Yeah, significant cut.
Yeah.
Their CEO, Scott Kirby, didn't mince words. He pointed directly at FAA challenges and basically said the government needs to limit flights to what the system can actually handle right now.
Acknowledging reality, I guess. Has the FAA responded?
They have acknowledged the staffing shortages, yes. They also point to construction.
Right.
There's a runway closure at Newark ongoing through mid-June, which isn't helping things.
Okay, so staffing plus construction.
Right. And Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy announced a plan. He wants to supercharge the air traffic controller workforce. Things like recruitment bonuses, trying to speed up training, and interestingly, maybe using flight volume controls.
Limiting flights, like Kirby suggested.
Potentially, yeah. But the question is how quickly any of that can actually make a difference on the ground.
Especially when you hear reports. I saw something about 20% of the controllers in Philadelphia, the ones now handling Newark, walking off the job. Is that right?
Those reports surfaced, yeah. Citing frustration. It really underscores the immense pressure those controllers are under right now. It's a worrying sign about morale and workload.
Unbelievable pressure, and the FAA had to take action.
They instituted what's called a flow-constrained area for Newark. That's a designation usually reserved for places like Florida during hurricane season or other major disruption zones. It signals severe capacity limitations.
Basically an official recognition that the system is overloaded.
Pretty much. And the knock-on effects. Delays at a huge hub like Newark don't stay at Newark. They ripple out across the entire country.
Yeah.
Your flight from Chicago to Denver might be late because of gridlock at Newark earlier in the day.
It snarls up the whole network. Even the governor of New Jersey got involved.
Governor Murphy,
Yeah.
He called the situation completely and utterly unacceptable. And he pointed to what he called decades of staffing decline at the FAA, needing reversal.
Decades of decline, and the stats are shocking. Over 90% of U.S. control towers staffed below the FAA's own standards.
That figure has been reported widely, yeah. It highlights that this isn't just a Newark problem, or even just a New York-Philly problem. It's a nationwide staffing challenge for the FAA.
A systemic issue. And on top of staffing, there was an equipment outage, too, recently.
Yeah, late April, early May 2025, reports cited an FAA equipment outage as another cause contributing to delays. So it's staffing, it's the move, it's construction, and it's tech gremlins.
Wow. So those grand strategic plans from 20 years ago, like the airspace redesign, were meant to solve long-term issues, but we're facing this immediate, acute operational meltdown. Is anything happening on the modernization front now?
Well, the FAA always has broader modernization efforts ticking along. A-Invest mentioned looking at these as a roadmap for investors, the long view.
Okay, but specifically at Newark, any concrete plans?
Yes. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, they announced their EWR Vision Plan back in October 2024. Big news, there's a total rebuild of Terminal B.
Following on from the new Terminal A.
Exactly. Terminal A opened recently, got good reviews generally. Now they're tackling Terminal B.
Will that help the delays? Modern terminals are nice, but...
Well, the plan isn't just the terminal building. It includes major upgrades to the airport roadways and, crucially, the taxiways. The idea is smoother traffic flow on the ground should reduce some congestion and delays there.
Better ground movement. Okay, that could help a bit.
It could, but it's a long haul. The planning process alone for Terminal B and the associated work is expected to take 2 to 3 years before major construction even starts.
So not an immediate fix for the current ATC crisis.
Definitely not. They're also working on replacing the air train, the monorail system, which is old and unreliable. That's important for getting passengers around, but again, doesn't solve the air traffic control bottleneck.
Right. Infrastructure upgrades are vital long-term, but the ATC staff as a whole is the bleeding wound right now. Okay, so for people who have to fly through Newark amidst this mess, how do you even get there from the city? The MTA had tips.
They did. Some practical advice. If you're coming from Midtown Manhattan, usually the quickest way is NJ Transit train to the airport station, then hop on the air train to your terminal. Costs about $16.80.
Okay. What about from downtown or Brooklyn?
From there, you can take the PATH train into Newark Penn Station, then switch to an NJ Transit train, then the air train. That's around $14.95.
A bit cheaper. Is there an even cheaper way?
Yep. The budget option is PATH to Newark Penn, then catch the #62 NJ Transit bus. That takes you right to the terminals. Costs only about $4.80.
Wow, big difference.
It is. And that bus option, the #62, is also the only one that runs 24/7. Plus, it's accessible.
Good to know. Any key things to remember when using these options?
Definitely. Crucially, NJ Transit trains are not 24/7, so if you have a super early or late flight, check those schedules carefully.
Don't get stranded.
Right. The MTA also really pushes using the NJ Transit app to buy your tickets ahead of time. Saves hassle. And, common sense. Always check the NJ Transit website right before you leave home for any last-minute service changes or delays. Things can change fast.
Good advice. Okay, so wrapping this all up, it's quite a story. Newark's delay problem is deep-rooted. Started with weather sensitivity, capacity limits.
Yeah, a system stretched thin for decades.
But what's really alarming now is this critical ATC staffing crisis layered on top. It feels like the system's breaking point.
It does. And while those efforts, back around 2000, the MIT study era, maybe slowed the growth of delays for a while, it clearly didn't solve the underlying vulnerabilities. And now, the staffing issue has blown things wide open. It's hitting travelers, hitting you hard.
Right. Hopefully this deep dive gives you a much better handle on why it's happening. It's way more complex than just bad weather or FAA delays flashing on the screen. There are layers upon layers here.
Decades of history, infrastructure limits, technology, and now, critically, human factors and staffing policies.
Which brings us to the really provocative thought, I think. Given all this history, all the studies like the MIT one, the strategic plans like the airspace redesign, the known need for better tech integration, coordination, and especially addressing staffing levels for years, why is the current crisis so severe?
Yeah, why now? What combination of factors finally pushed it over the edge?
And maybe more importantly, what's it actually going to take to fix it? To get reliable air travel back at a massive, vital hub like Newark, it really forces you to think about how all these pieces, the concrete, the computers, the people, the policies have to work together. And right now, they're clearly not.
It's a complex puzzle. So maybe something for you to chew on. Thinking about all this, what's the path forward? Is it just throwing money at hiring? Is it managing demand, like capping flights? Is it accelerating tech? Or is it a combination of everything requiring a level of coordination and political will we haven't seen yet? Definitely something to think about next time you're looking at that departure board.